and welcome to the latest episode of People Matter. Is it fair for an employer to dismiss an employee for a single inappropriate remark? This was a question a tribunal had to ask itself in a recent case. The case involved Mr. Coleman, who had been a swimming teacher at a leisure trust since 2015. In September 2022, he taught a swimming lesson to a group of Year 5 and 6 pupils from a primary school, so aged between 9 and 11. During the lesson, he said to one of the female pupils, "It looks like you work out." The school complained about this and said the comment was inappropriate and had caused the child and the school teacher to feel uncomfortable. The following week, before the swimming lesson, the school checked whether Mr. Coleman would be teaching the lesson, as the pupils' parents had asked them to find out about this. Following the school's complaint, Mr. Coleman was suspended on full pay, and the trust investigated the allegation. Mr. Coleman admitted having made the remark and that it was inappropriate, and he was invited to a disciplinary hearing to consider allegations of gross misconduct. The trust's position was that Mr. Coleman's conduct amounted to a safeguarding concern, that the comment had been inappropriate, it had caused distress and potential damage to the pupil, and had caused damage to the trust's reputation. The trust decided that Mr. Coleman's conduct amounted to gross misconduct and summarily dismissed him. Mr. Coleman appealed that decision, and the appeal was not upheld. Mr. Coleman then brought a complaint of unfair dismissal to the Employment Tribunal. Before the Employment Tribunal, it was decided that the reason for the dismissal was conduct, and the Tribunal had to consider the question of whether the dismissal had been fair. The Tribunal followed the approach to misconduct dismissals set out in the famous case of BHS and Birchall, which involved asking itself a number of questions, namely, had the trust genuinely believed that Mr. Coleman had committed the misconduct? If so, was that belief based on reasonable grounds? Had the trust carried out as much investigation as was appropriate in the circumstances? Had a fair procedure been followed? And if the answer to all those questions was yes, and in this case it was the decision to dismiss within the band of reasonable responses open to the trust? Or should a lesser sanction have been imposed? The Tribunal examined this and made a number of comments when deciding whether the decision to dismiss fell within the band of reasonable responses. It noted that it may seem somewhat harsh that someone is dismissed for a first offence of a single remark, although it also noted that Mr. Coleman had admitted that he'd made the remark and that it was inappropriate. The Tribunal also noted that it was important to consider the trust's position. It looked at the trust's disciplinary policy, which stated that summary dismissal may occur for major breaches of policy or where the trust's reputation is or might be brought into disrepute. The Tribunal noted that swimming teachers are in a position of trust, and inappropriate conduct could, and in this case did, lead to damage to the trust's reputation, given that the school complained and the pupils' parents wanted to know if Mr. Coleman would be teaching again. The comment was an inappropriate one about a child's body, had been made when the child was wearing swimwear and in front of other people, and showed that Mr. Coleman had been observing the child's physical appearance. The Tribunal's conclusion was that Mr. Coleman's conduct amounted to gross misconduct, either as a serious violation of health and safety practices, or alternatively as being of equivalent seriousness as other examples of gross misconduct set out in the trust policy. The Tribunal decided that although a lesser sanction could have been imposed, it was within the band of reasonable responses for the trust to dismiss Mr. Coleman, and therefore it dismissed his claim of unfair dismissal. So what can we learn from this case? Well, it shows that in some cases it may be appropriate to dismiss an employee for a single inappropriate remark, but it will always depend on all the circumstances of the case, and it will always be important to follow a fair procedure.